Good evening. Welcome to the Spiritual But Not Religious Show. I'm your host, George Lewis. Sorry for the delay tonight. We've got our guest is in Glastonbury in Great Britain, in England, and we've had some difficulties. We had planned to be able to have video with him tonight, but we're not going to be able to. But anyhow, it's a great night. I have every intention of freaking you out tonight with tonight's guest. I think you'll have a great time with him. Really bright guy. Let me tell you about him in just a minute. I want to give you an idea about next week's guest and tell you a little bit about the Spiritual Broadcasting Network and what we're doing here. My guest next week is Michael Myrdad. Michael wrote a book, actually two books we're going to talk about, Tantra and Sacred Sexuality and Healing the Heart and Soul. I've read them, great books. You want to be sure and catch next week's show. My guest tonight is, I told you I was going to freak you out. It's Timothy Freke. And Timothy wrote this book, which is a fantastic book, How Long Is Now? And I'll tell you what, Tim has written over 20 books. Actually, he's not aware of it at this point, but he and his co-author on a couple of books, really, Peter Gandy, really were a couple of my teachers for years ago in studying the Gnostic Gospels and the early Christianity and getting what the real scoop was and what happened back in that time. Tom, we got Tim on the phone?
We do.
Good evening, Tim.
Good evening.
Oh, I think we finally got it together. Listen, you've been a really good sport about all this technical stuff that was giving us difficulties. Thank you.
That's my pleasure. It's a delight to be talking to you.
I tell you what, I have totally been looking forward to this because you and your co-author on a couple of your books have been you count as a couple of my teachers. I have enjoyed your work for many years at this point.
I'm really pleased. The books have been of value. It makes the long hours worthwhile.
Boy, I'll tell you what, I've written a book, so I know what you're talking about. Of course, there's something about the process there too that's pretty. I don't know. I found that the whole process of writing a book pretty rewarding.
Well, it's a great delight for me because the great thing about being a writer has been that I've been able to explore my passion and have the time to do it. So it's been every time I write a book, I've just finished a new one. How Long Is Now before that. I'm transformed by the process. It's not easy necessarily. It's always a struggle to find the new, to find something really valuable, but it's worth it.
Especially after 20 books. I found it easy because I had one book in me. We'll see if there's another one. I'm not sure on that. I started kind of late in life as far as writing. I had planned to write when I was in high school, and then, I decided to do other things as it went along. So you live in Glastonbury, and how's the Glastonbury Festival?
It's a marvelous thing. A whole city appears overnight here. It's a quirky little town, Glastonbury. It's a center of spirituality, and it has been for centuries. It goes right back to pagan times, and
right.
We had the biggest abbey in Christendom here. And now it's a kind of center for spirituality without religion.
So did you choose Glastonbury, or did it choose you? Are you?
It chose me, really. I was born nearby, and so a lot of people come here because they think it's a special place. But I was born quite close, and I kind of just got sucked into it, and this is where I live.
Well, I guess things don't always happen by accident, so there must be something there for you. Yeah, I see you get some real, Don McLean, American Pie, was there this year, huh? You got a lot of Paul, I lost the last name there, but
Paul Simon?
Yeah, you just got a whole host of great artists that come there.
Yeah, I took my kids. We got very, very muddy.
Oh, it was raining, huh?
Oh, yeah, it was like the Somme.
But that's kind of England, isn't it?
That is kind of England.
Yeah, you get a lot of rain. But you do a lot of traveling. So you were in Las Vegas not too long ago?
Yeah, the last place I've just been to is Calgary in Canada. And I hope to be coming out to the States next year to run these mystery experience retreats, which I do mainly in Glastonbury, but also all over the world.
Where's that retreat going to be at here?
Well, I'm not absolutely sure yet. If people want to find out about that, they really need to check in with my website, timfreke.com. And people need to remember it's Freke, F-R-E-K-E, although it is pronounced Freke.
Right, right.
And if they sign up there to the mailing list, they'll find out when I'm coming. I'm just organizing it now. Got a new book coming out in May, so I'm sure to be over. I really like coming to the States. I love the people, and I just love to do these events because what I do now really is to just take people directly into the deep awake state, and it's just beautiful seeing that over just the course of a few days, like a weekend. 95% of the people that come along can enter a very, very deep state, and you can once you taste it for yourself, it's such an immediate experience. It's the love, the oneness. It's just so transformative. You can't miss it. It's not like an idea. It's not just a theory. I mean, I'm a philosopher, so a lot of what I do is to share ideas, but also by sharing direct practices, you can come into these states very, very quickly. And it astonishes me the transformation that can happen.
Well, you've read William James, I'm sure. When you read his Varieties of Spiritual Religion and most other things, you get the idea that this really happens by grace or accidentally. I think it's marvelous that you're able to bring people into that state intentionally.
I mean, I do myself. I mean, to be perfectly frank with you, George, I wouldn't have believed it. Because for me, in my journey, it started very young for me when I was just 12, 13 years old and just fell into this awake state and spent my whole life trying to find it again, and it would come by grace, and then I'd find ways of reaching it. And then to have arrived at a place, I mean, practice is the biggest grace, to have arrived at a place where I can be pretty confident that we can go directly. I mean, I just was in Calgary. Just about everyone by the Saturday night was so surprised to be in this very, very deep state. And it astonishes me every time. I never take it for granted. It always feels like a miracle. But it just keeps happening. And I think it's part of something which is generally happening, but it's certainly my own work has just taken this huge jump forward in terms of the experience that I can directly offer people.
Well, it looks to me like a regular quantum leap in that area. It
really is.
Yeah.
It really is, because people want to have the experience. I mean, a lot of people, they understand intellectually that everything is one. They understand intellectually that there is a state of awakening, and they tend to think it's for somebody else or they could never have it. But to be able to sit with people and go, no, you can. Absolutely. This is your birthright. All you need to be is you. You need to be human. There's a natural human experience open to everyone, and it's a breath away. It really, really is.
Well, we've been so indoctrinated to think that we need an intermediary between us and a higher power, God, whatever you want to call that force. That you even break past that is pretty powerful.
I think so, and I think part of what I do is not to make myself the intermediary either. I'm just Tim. I'm not a guru. I'm not special. I don't claim to have any special, anything. And yet, if we come into that authenticity together and we pay attention to our deeper nature, it just happens of itself. And certainly, when you do it with a group of people, it can happen much more powerfully, much, much more quickly.
Well, we jumped into this pretty quickly without really giving our audience any idea of what deep awake is. Why don't you tell us what deep awake is and why they might want to find their way there?
Well, it seems to me that most of the time we exist in a semi-conscious state. We're awake, but we're not aware of the depths of life. And one of the telltale signs of that is that we don't even notice the most obvious thing about our predicament. Because that's how unconscious we are. And by that I mean we don't notice that life is the most breathtaking mystery.
Absolutely.
It's an unspeakable mystery. This moment right now, what is it to be alive? What is it to be in this universe of 100 billion galaxies? What is it to be talking to each other, to be conscious, to be experiencing this flow of colors and shapes and sounds and thoughts? It's intensely mysterious. And when we don't notice that, we're just in this kind of numbness we call normal. But when you start to notice the mystery and go deeply into the mystery, then this deeper state of consciousness opens up, what I call being deeply awake. Or sometimes I also call it living lucidly, because it's a state very much like lucid dreaming, except it's right now. I call it lucid living.
Right.
And you come into a place where you see that you are not what you think you are, that life is much more than you think it is. And this is not, like I said, this is not an idea. I mean, what I convey it in is ideas, but it's a direct experience. And as you have it, there is this profound sense of oneness and this overwhelming love, this sense of being connected through love with everything and everyone.
So that do you equate that to a similar experience to, like, when someone uses psychedelics to break through that barrier?
Well, I experimented with psychedelics a fair bit when I was much younger, and it certainly did take me there. I don't think it takes everyone there. I know people have very widely different experiences. I think so much of it is about your intention.
Right.
You know, when I was experimenting with psychedelics, it was because I wanted it to take me there, and it did. I think if you use them recreationally, it may not. I think it's to do with how you approach it. And the things I do with people at my mystery experience retreats are very, very, very simple. I allow people to connect with each other through what they're already experiencing. You know, looking, listening, touching, the things we're already doing. Nothing special, nothing out of the ordinary, just actually noticing how amazing the ordinary is. And when that happens in the right context, the effect is unbelievable. And the sense of being oneself, of coming home, of just swimming in this ocean of love is unmissable. You know, you can't really say it, but by golly, you can feel it.
Well, yeah, when you have that kind of experience, well, as a matter of fact, that's one of the things about the mystic experience period is it's not something you can really put into words.
I know, isn't that a pain when you're trying to write a book?
Yeah, it's like, or even talk with somebody. It's like they really need to get to that space, that state, to really understand what we're talking about. Hey, before we go any further, I'm a little curious. Peter Gandy had some kind of a brain bleed or something. Is he all right?
He did, and he's really all right. He's my next-door neighbor now. He's moved in next door to me here in Glastonbury, and is doing really, really well. He's off at the moment making a documentary, actually, and he's healthy. And I think I haven't seen him. You know, he feels very awake to me and full of love, and very alert and very present. And yeah, I think it's actually been really good for him in that bizarre way that life works.
How'd you two hook up in the beginning? Where did you meet at?
Well, I had this awakening when I was 12 years old.
Right.
When I just kind of fell into this deep awake state for the first time, and from that state, I wrote a play. It's always been in my nature to write, and I wrote a play about the experience and about what I could see, and it was performed by kids. It was quite controversial, and the TV came down to film it and all sorts, because it was all kids, and I was just a kid who'd written it, and Peter was in that play. And we started a conversation then, and here we are, nearly 30-something years later. We're still having the same conversation every day when we meet up, which we do most days. It's the same thing. So life, what do you make of it so far?
And you've even moved him next door, right?
And yeah, I'm speaking to you now from my office, which is actually at the end of his garden.
And what did you buy the house? Is that yours, or he buy? How'd that?
Well, we had a house and we moved next door, and he moved into the house we had been living in.
Oh, great. So let's kind of turn a bit here I'd like to know, you are really committed and active and working on a daily basis to wake people up, to help them to awaken to this bigger self, this higher self. And it's so obvious you're so dedicated, the amount of time, it can't be, I know it's not about money. What's your motive for doing that? What are you looking for?
Oh, what a deep question. George, I think the answer is love. I mean, for me, the thing which happens when you come into this deep awake state is just there's love, and love is not love unless it's expressed. And so I try to give back what I've got. I mean, I receive a huge amount from so many people. And what I have to give back is that I seem to be able to take people to this awakened state. And I do that, as I said, not as someone who's special. I just do it as a regular guy. But it seems to be something I can do because I've done it so much now, I know I can do that. So my motivation is, well, you mentioned the Gnostics, that I wrote books on the Gnostics with Peter, the Jesus Mysteries, and Jesus and the Lost Goddess, and so forth. One of the great quotes I love is from one of the Gnostic Gospels called the Gospel of Philip. And they're talking about the gnosis, which means the knowing, the knowledge.
Right.
And that's another name for what I call being deep awake, or enlightenment, or whatever word works for you. It's the way, it's finding your true self, finding God within you, whatever way you want to say it. And there's this one line I really love, and it says, "Those who are free because of gnosis become slaves because of love." And that's my sense of it, that the more that I felt liberated through this awakening, through this gnosis, the more I felt like compelled because of love to give everything I can give. And this is what I can give. So hence the reason I'm up at 2 o'clock in the morning talking to you.
Yeah, well, which I think is just marvelous that you would wait up like that. Well, speaking about what you're talking about, many years ago, the St. Francis prayer became, for me, a part of my way of life. And it was exactly what you just talked about, because what I get is that love. Somehow or other, we give that out, and we get it back tenfold. It's not something you would expect. You really have to experience it, but it's very powerful.
Yeah, I feel the same, George. It's like, my ideas, since I was 12 years old, and I first experienced what I call this big love, this all-embracing love, this oneness, all my ideas have really developed. I mean, I like to think as a philosopher, I'm, more sophisticated than when I was 12, and I hadn't got a clue. But the one thing which has stayed the same all these decades is that fundamentally this life is about love. This awakening is about love. And when we discover our own deeper nature, there is this great well of love within us, which is the love we seek personally, and it's also a love we can share. And it's a love that doesn't take away the suffering of life, but it mitigates the suffering. It allows you to really appreciate just how good most of life is, and it allows you to hold with compassion those parts of life which are really, really hard, because much of it is also hard.
Much of it is difficult. The questions you were asking when you were 12, I was asking those same questions at about 7 or 8. The difference between you and I is I didn't have the experience you're talking about until many years later, and I had to go through a whole litany of struggles, to finally get to that point. But I guess we all we get there on our own time and in our own way, don't we?
I think so. It really makes no difference. I mean, my journey has been my particular journey. There's also involved a lot of struggle and a lot of getting lost and losing myself and finding myself and losing myself and finding myself and so it goes. But it did start very young for me. Most people, it's much later. It really makes no difference. But, it's really only now. The only time it really matters is, are we awake now?
Yeah, everything else is frivolous. Doesn't matter, does it?
Really, it's kind of all gone. This is the moment with God, and everything else, is a story.
So let me. I want to ask you something that I'm very curious about. So you live this life. You train people. You're immersed in it. Have you moved out of the state of where you're involved with what's going on in the world itself? I mean, because a lot of people that I know that I talk with divorce themselves really from the world, and they're not involved. Are you involved? I mean, are you politically involved, or do you stay strictly on the spiritual side of the whole thing?
I'm kind of the opposite of that, George. I think the more I've tasted this awakened state, the more involved I become. Mean, How Long Is Now, in particular, the book that you showed earlier,
right?
For me, was an attempt to say, look, this idea that somehow we need to reject the world or divorce ourselves from the world. I'm a family man. I have children. How could I not be involved in the world?
Right.
How could you love and not be involved in the world? To me, the whole thing about awakening is that you can really make the journey. You see, it seems to me that most of us hold back from life. We're frightened of it because it's so scary. I mean, it really is. I mean, if you're not frightened by life, really, you haven't been paying attention. It's a scary business. But when you taste this deep safety within you, then you can dare to make the journey. So I feel like in one way, what's been happening to me is that I'm finally willing to risk being Tim. Who is a very vulnerable, harsh, temporary person. He's with all of the foibles and problems that every person has. And what the awakening does for me is not to take that away, but it gives me the confidence to actually engage with the process of my little adventure and make the most of it while it's here, because it's so short and so precious.
So very short.
I'd say it's about being more involved with life, daring to enter in. I think of it as enlivenment rather than enlightenment. That you're enlivened. You want to actually engage with the sensuality of life, with the transformational drama of life, and that's what leads to an ever deepening awakening, it seems to me.
See, that's been my experience. When I read your book here, that was one of the things that I can tell when somebody is in truth and talking from their experience, and you can too. And early on, I think my quest was more about escape than anything else. But it's the opposite has happened to me. I'm very much more inclined to be involved with life, and I'm more present with the people that I love and that I'm around. Go ahead.
I think it's very common, George. I have the same thing. I think there were long times in my early life, especially, where it was like it seems to me, and this is something which has really dawned on me over the last period. Having written many books, being critical of religion, and wanting to bring out the spiritual essence and lose all of the dogmatic religion. That's why I love the title of your show. I think it's really important. But it's dawned on me recently that that what we've done in the West is having seen clearly that a lot of Western religion wasn't going to do it, that we needed to find a deep spirituality. We've actually imported a great deal of Eastern religion. And there's a huge number of people involved in spirituality who think Eastern religion is just the way it is. And by Eastern, I mean really Indian. And you get this sense of, often in Indian religion, of withdrawal from life. Hence the state that India's in, because many of the greatest minds there have withdrawn from life. Well, I don't think that's the way it is. I don't think that's necessarily the great spiritual truth. It's just one way of looking at it. And I think the time has come for us to see through that and to see something else, which is about waking up and engaging. It's about knowing yourself and showing yourself. It's about self-realization and also self-expression. There's always these two sides to everything, because life is so paradoxical. There's always two sides. So it's about understanding that at your depths, all is one. You're not really even a person. You're just this presence of awareness, of spirit, of essence. And that's a very real thing to see. And then from that, to allow the person you appear to be to come to life, to really enter into life with love, and to give yourself away, to be there for life, as a servant of life.
Well, you're talking about the importation of the Eastern philosophy, religion, whatever you want to call it. You were born in what, 1959?
1959.
Well, you see, I by the time the 60s came along, I was in the Marine Corps, and the Beatles had brought had got hooked up with the Maharishi Mahet Yoga, and that's about the time that the Eastern religion, as I saw it, started to really have some kind of a force. When I looked at it, Tim, I was enamored with it early on, and I got really involved in metaphysics, and both Eastern and Western. And what I saw is just what you just said, and that is that when you look at what happened to India, who withdrew and they were poor and in poverty, impoverished, and then you look at us, the West, and we got all involved in greed. It seems to me that what needs to happen is a melting of the two there somewhere, where East meets West, I guess.
Yes, that feels right to me. But don't get me wrong. I have been hugely influenced by Indian philosophy. I have immense respect for it. My life has been dominated by it. But I also think we need to question everything.
Yeah.
Because only by questioning do we really come to understand. And so there's many Indian ideas that no longer work for me. Enlightenment, for instance, the idea of arising somewhere, no longer works for me. And I think it stands in the way. Because when you see how easy it is to take this awakened state, you don't need to think you've got to wait lifetimes. You don't need to think that it's out of reach for anyone except someone who lives in a cave and has an ander at the end of their name. It's like it's available to you and me. And the people listening to this. It's available to all of us. It's a breath away. It's who we really are. So, there's lots of these ideas which can make it harder than it needs to be. And withdrawal is another one. In my experience, of course, why I think these mystery experience retreats that I run around the world, why they work so well for people, is because the first thing I say is, look, your separateness, your human self, that's not going to go away. It's actually going to always be there. So just let that be and notice this deeper self as well, not instead. The separateness is still there, but the oneness will be there as well. You won't become perfect. You'll still be, I like to say everyone is a great soul and an arsehole. Everyone.
Totally, yeah.
And once you get that, it's like, chill out. You're not going to be perfect. Nobody is. I've met a lot of people, a lot of great masters, and everyone's the same.
Right.
Everyone is the same. If we can get this, then we can be kind to each other and ourselves, and we can be tolerant with each other and ourselves, and we can see that we can wake up to the deep self without becoming some sort of perfect person, because that's an illusion. That doesn't exist. We can actually just be authentically what we are, which is partial, wounded, vulnerable people who have a deeper nature which we can become conscious of, which truly is all loving, and they coexist, all the time. We just have to notice it.
So let me ask you: when you help people to awaken, and that's the primary purpose in the moment. Is there some larger thing you have in mind that like waking up enough people that maybe the world might change a bit?
I would hope to play some small role in that, George. To me, everything is evolving, and
yes.
and there's no doubt in my mind that there is a greater level of awakening happening now than at any other time, probably in history. I'm pretty sure in the whole of history, from my study of history. So I think it's exponential. It's increasing. However, it's still very small. Very, very small.
Yes.
This conversation we're having is going to be listened to a small fraction of people compared to all the other things which are available right now. And we need to be very sober about it. We need to see it as it really is, but we also need to be optimistic. I feel that we're laying seeds for our children's children. It's a gift of compassion to the future. But we must lay those seeds now, and some of us are being drawn to that. And those that are, my aim is to assist people to find themselves so that they can then contribute what they have to contribute. And to take whatever I can give them, take the way that I can show them to the deep awake state, and then to engage with their own lives, their own adventure, and to bring something to life. And if enough of us do that, then the world will change. Whether we'll live to see a big transformation, I would love to think so, but probably not.
Probably not.
But it will happen, and I have great confidence in that.
I do too. Well, it's evolving now, and you can see it in process, although it's not happening necessarily as quickly as some of us would like. That's for sure. But let's talk about a bit about the need for that, because you've got such a vast experience with, like you say, talking about religion and the amount of time, effort, and study you put into it. When we look at today, I've watched your country and some of the difficulties they've had with religion, with Islam at this point. What's going on there now? how is all that playing out? Some of what I saw in London was demonstrations and anger and angst and difficulty. Is that happening now, or is that pretty?
Well, we had an outburst of rioting, but I think it's easy to exaggerate it. It was, a few small pockets, and fueled, I think, by frustration, what's happening in the economy more than anything else.
Right.
What astonishes me in this country, and indeed generally throughout the world, but certainly in this country, is the level of tolerance that, we have so many different cultures with such wildly different beliefs all living next door to each other now.
Right.
And by and large, it works. And I think that's astonishing. That's a whole new thing in history, especially because the indigenous culture in Great Britain has become very secularized, and therefore is not religious in that way. And people who've come in are still very much caught in older forms of religion, which, in my view, are really a bit past their sell-by date. Then we need to move on. So, but I think if we can hold the vision that what really matters is not the dogma, not the religion, not the thing not your identity in that sense, but finding a deeper identity, then I think we can find ways to connect, and I think that is happening. I mean, it's a huge way to go still, as always, but it's happening more than ever.
Well, the people that you get in your retreats and in your workshops, do you get any of the I don't know exactly how to say this, the Christian or the Muslim who's like really into that to that belief system? Do you get that kind of person? Do you get a more open, more esoteric, more metaphysical mindset?
Well, I don't get people who are really involved in traditional religion at my retreats. I do get them come to my talks. And I do interact with them, and I do have an awful lot of emails from people who have been involved in traditional religion, have read my books,
right,
and feel that it set them free.
Yes.
But I'd say one of the things I love about the retreats is that it really attracts such a wide diversity of people. We have men and women, young and old, professional people, businessmen, but also people who haven't got a penny in the world. We get a whole cross-section of people. There is no type, and I really love that. And I think it's something to do with the fact that what I work with is philosophy. I mean, I love the mind. I think the mind is really important. We need to clarify the mind, and yet we need to clarify the mind to open the heart.
Right.
So these two go together, and I think that dual message attracts all sorts of different people. And when you bring a lot of very different people together, and then they come into a place where they see that at their depth there's just one of us. There's one of us dreaming itself to be everything, and then meeting itself in all these different forms. When that happens, it's astonishing because you've got a young man and an old lady, and sitting next to somebody who's from another country, and people come from all over the world to my retreats in Glastonbury, and there's such a mix. And yet, when we come into the people where to stay, we move from strangers to lovers, absolutely naturally. And there we all are together, and people can just relax into being themselves. In every way, there's this deep self, which just is what it is, and it's just obvious. And then there's this expression, these separate selves, which are also gloriously unique, also different, and that's what makes them so attractive.
I watched a couple of negative videos from Christians about one was complaining about you, Elaine Pagels, and your co-author, your friend Peter, and it's do you get a lot of that kind of thing from the books that you wrote? I mean, you get a lot of people who rise up against that.
Well, we haven't had any death threats, but we've had an awful lot of after-death threats.
I bet.
There's a little corner of hell which has been set aside for Peter and me, where we're going to be tortured forever by a God of love.
I'm sure. Well, what's amazing about all that is that if they were if they're really looking at the religion to be love, and yet we spew out all that hatred, it doesn't make any sense at all.
What I find myself doing, George, when people do approach me in that way, is I try and say, well, look, there's a deep truth in Christianity. It's probably the deepest truth I've ever come across, and that is to love your enemy.
Yes.
So if we can agree that we need to, love each other as ourselves, and we need to love our enemies, then we can meet even though we disagree.
Yes.
And we can meet in love, and we can disagree in love. Because even if someone sees me as an enemy, then we can still love each other. And my hope is always to disarm people and just find a place where we can agree, and then within that we can say our different truths.
How were you raised as far as your spiritual life? Well, how did your parents raise you?
I was brought up in the Church of England, which is a very liberal church.
Uh-huh.
And my parents were not very religious. My father certainly was not. He was a great skeptic. I think I got my ability to doubt and be skeptical from my dad. My mum was religious a bit, but I went to church on my own for a while. It was high church, so I was the boat boy, all dressed up in white, carrying around the incense.
Uh-huh.
And I went for some years just because I found the numinous there. I was so, ever since I can remember, wanting to penetrate the mystery of life, and it just felt like this was a space in which I could meditate or be with the mystery.
Right.
And there was nowhere else to be found. So I enjoyed church. It did me no harm. I didn't get damaged. I wasn't filled with guilt. I didn't have all of these problems which so many people do.
Yeah, I wasn't damaged by it. I was actually raised a drop-off Methodist. My mother.
What's a drop-off Methodist?
My mother would drop me at the front door of the church and pick me up afterwards. She was not religious at all.
Right.
But the church never did me any harm. But I certainly have seen a lot of people who have been harmed by it.
Me too.
So what do you think that Jesus was like a historical figure? You think it was mythic? Because some of your books talked about, you go back to Dionysius and you found the same story.
Yeah, I mean the whole thrust of our international bestseller, The Jesus Mysteries, is that,
yes.
George, that what we have in the Jesus story is not history; it's a myth. And if you look at it, if you stand back, it's the story of a man who's born of a virgin, walks on water, and comes back from the dead. I mean, it sounds like a myth, and that's because it is a myth.
Right.
And not only it's a myth, but it's actually a very, very old myth. It's a pagan myth. You find all of the same motifs, from the virgin birth to dying at Easter, sometimes by crucifixion, turning water into wine, 12 disciples, the whole thing. You find already existing in many, many different pagan myths that were current throughout the whole of the ancient world. They all go back eventually, I think, to Egypt, to the stories of Osiris, but also in the myths of Dionysus in Greece, and Mithras in Persia, and Adonis, and Apis, and Serapis, and many, many more.
Right.
And what you find, I think we've got here is Gnostics, people involved with this awakening to Gnosis, probably in Alexandria, Jews in Alexandria, picking up these ancient pagan myths and synthesizing them with their own Jewish mythology of Joshua or Jesus, who takes you to the promised land, which was a metaphor for Gnosis, for arriving in Gnosis. And in this way, they created a new myth. And that myth, as all cultures were doing this at the time, and this new myth is the myth that has come down to us as the story of Jesus,
right,
which is wrongly being interpreted by the Roman Empire as history. And so a myth which was an allegory, which was designed to set you free and to bring you to God within, has actually become a set of beliefs written down in a book that you're told you have to believe and that you'll reap some benefit when you die. So it's kind of lost its depth, because really it's about now. It's really about now. The gnosis is now, and the whole purpose is that you resurrect, you come to life now.
There isn't anything else except now.
I haven't noticed anything else, have you?
No. Well, the only thing, when I get out and if I, get myself out in the future and I'm fearful or I'm regretful of the past, I've lost my connection to the source. And it's, I only have any connection that I'm aware of in the present moment when I'm right here in my feet, and the rest of it's just kind of all thought, isn't it? So,
yeah, I mean, the question I love, because I made it the title of my last book, is how long is now?
exactly.
And I love that question because it really messes with your melon. It's going to play with your head and
Messes with your melon. I like that. One of the things I like about you and Peter is that like you have all this serious material, but you're wise enough to have a good time and not waste that part of life that's so precious to us. And like you said earlier, it goes way, way too fast.
It does. I mean, my favorite book that Peter and I did together was our last book together, which was called The Gospel of the Second Coming. And that's a really naughty book. I mean, if anyone's easily offended, don't go out and buy that. But if you like a belly laugh, if you like to laugh out loud, then that's the book for you. Because what we did in that book was put all of this profound historical information and mythological wisdom into a book which was also comedy. So we got a comedy gospel, and the subtitle, which I love, was "Jesus is back, and this time he's funny."
And this time he's funny. I saw your.
And we've got a funny Jesus, and I love that. It's just it's such fun, and I think we need to be able to laugh at these things. I think it's important to laugh at all the things you hold most precious.
When you talk about laughing at all things that are most precious, I want to kind of like move into we're talking about the same area, but I've spent a good deal of my life doing what I see that you have done, as far as that real deep search for spirituality, and I heard the phrase that we are spiritual beings having a human experience. That the quote from and I pondered that for a long time, and what I saw was myself really questing after becoming spiritual, and I thought, well, if I'm spiritual already, well, what am I doing here? Maybe maybe I should be worried more about being what I'm doing with my humanity, and bringing that spirit into my day-to-day living. It changed things for me. And go ahead.
Yeah, I think the same for me. I think it's really important. I mean, maybe I could just say something a bit about this idea of lucid living.
Yeah, please do.
It could really open up these ideas for the good folks who are listening to our conversation. The awakened state, it really reminds me of lucid dreaming. When you dream at night, normally you're just sucked into your story of your dream. You think you're the person you appear to be in the dream. You take the dream world on face value. But if you dream lucidly, you dream consciously, you realize that what you appear to be in the dream is not all you are. Really, you're the dreamer. Really, you're the awareness within which the dream is arising. And you both exist in the dream, and the dream exists in you at the same time. And they both are true. And when you dream lucidly, the dream continues, and you can have this new perspective. And the awakened state seems very similar to me, but now. And in the same way, when I look right now, I see that I exist in this paradoxical state where, in the dream of life, I'm Tim, I'm this guy, I'm this very, this particular individual. And yet when I sink back into my deeper nature, I'm this spacious awareness within which the dream of life is arising. And there is no separateness. And then one of us. So here I'm separate, one amongst many, and in my depths, it's all one. And there's this spiritual essence which just holds everything within it. And it's both. It's not either this or that. It's both this and that. It's, there's my humanity and my divinity, and they both exist side by side. And to me, the more I can be in touch with my deep self, the more that Tim can engage with the life. And the more that Tim can engage with life, the more I can be in touch with my deep self. And these two go together. So we need to stop thinking in terms of either or, and really recognize that fundamentally what we're looking for is both ends. That we're looking to do both of those at once, because that's being true to who we really are.
Well, I think the difficulty with that idea for most people is that instead of embracing the polarity that we live in, they try to escape the polarity and just be that one. And I think this is my thoughts on it, is they're trying to escape their own dark side. They don't want to own that part of themselves, and the only way, one of the ways to do that is just to try and, leave the polarity behind and get into the oneness.
I meet a huge number of people who are waiting to experience the oneness, and they think to experience it, the separateness is going to go away.
Right.
But the fact is, the separateness is not going to go away, because the separateness is what makes us conscious in the first place. When there's no separateness, there's no consciousness. We go there every night in deep sleep. I should be there now.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm not, because there's separateness, because I'm conscious of being Tim talking to you. We're different. We're separate. I'm conscious of the microphone. I'm conscious of all of these separate things. I'm conscious of my thoughts, not of yours. It's all separate. That's why I'm conscious. But behind that, there's this profound oneness. And once you see that the oneness is there as well, not instead, it's not either separate or all one, it's both separate and all one. Now, normally we get just lost in the separateness, but by awakening, we can also be conscious of the oneness. And when we see it's both, not either or, it becomes so much easier to awaken. Really so much easier, because you're allowing it to be as it actually is, already, right now, in this moment. Nothing needs to change. You just need to notice the thing you haven't noticed before. You just need to see the deeper thing as well as the superficial thing. And if you see both, wow, there it is. And when you see both, that's when the love kicks in. The love is when we see we're separate and not separate from each other. If you just go for the oneness, it will get very cold. And you'll see a lot of Advaitic philosophy, which is popular at the moment. It all gets very cold because it pushes our humanity away.
And you see that,
when you embrace both, there's the love.
And you see that happening in the teachers of that. You can actually see that aloofness, that coldness, that they move away from themselves and from life. Your term deep awake, very clever. Too many of us are deep asleep. We need to be deep awake. In your book, you talked about a big part of your spiritual experience and was breathing, just the simple act of breathing. Is that a part of your workshops? There are actually modalities that do breath work. You do that kind of thing, or you just breathe?
I don't do breath work. I do breath play.
I like that. That's better.
To me, I was, when I started meditating many years ago, like many of us, I was, suggested I meditate on my breath, and it seemed like a hard thing to do, and I tried to stop my mind and blah, blah, blah. And then I discovered something, and now I just teach this to people, which is if you sink into your breath, it is so pleasurable. If people are listening to this, do it now. If you just focus on your breath and relax into it, it's almost sexy. It's really, to breathe is utterly delicious. And as you sink into your breath, and it becomes so delicious just to breathe, it's an immense feeling of relief, because you've got everything you need. It's just in breathing. It's enough. It's more than enough. And if you sink into it and you appreciate it, then the awakened state starts to arise of itself. So I just teach something very simple in regard to breath, which is just how delicious it is. And again, most people, if they try it, oh my goodness, you're right. It is so delicious, isn't it? How did I miss that?
When I read your book, I stopped and did exactly that, and my experience was just what you said it would be. And it was, part of the thing is, you bring this out in your book also, is that we really missed the idea of the mystery of life. I think we get so caught up in trying to control our environment that we try and define the undefinable. We try and define God, and the truth is, God's such a mystery. We'll never wrap our mind around that whole idea, I don't think.
How could we? Anyone who thinks they've got this all sorted out and is certain about anything is completely mad.
Well, they're whacked.
With 100 billion galaxies, if you live to be 80, you've got 4,000 weeks.
Exactly.
To be certain about anything is crazy. And what that does is it cuts you off, as you say, George, from the mystery. And the mystery is where the awakening is. Awakening, I've just written a book called The Mystery Experience, based on what I do in my retreats and enlarging upon it. And the center of that is that awakening is as simple as not knowing. when you enter a deep state of not knowing, when you see the truth, which is you don't know. None of us do. None of us know what's going on. I mean, nobody. I don't think anybody, not even the masters or any of these people, nobody knows what's going on. And when you see that, and you step into that not knowing, life becomes luminous. You see this, you see it in a new way. But the key here, and again I return to the same thing, is that doesn't mean you've got to pretend you know. Also, you know a lot. I mean, I know who I am. I know I'm talking to you. I know how to work this microphone. I know how we're talking on the internet. I know you're in America and I'm in the UK. I know loads of stuff. So do you. But below that, there is this profound mystery. I don't know what life is. I know how to use Skype, but I don't know what life is.
And we stumble with Skype, let alone life, right?
Well, that's true. Didn't know how to use Skype either. But you know, there's a whole. What I'm trying to suggest is the both and again. That we need our stories, we need our understanding, we need to think clearly. All of that's fine. It's good. We need it. But we also need to see the depth. And at the depth, we fundamentally don't know what this moment is. It's, you know, and whenever we look into it deeply, we find it's not what we think. I mean, I'm a big fan of science, and I just love the idea that I'm looking here now, and I'm looking at my hand, I'm tapping my hand, and I know from the studies of science that is nearly totally empty space. And yet there it is. And just to get that, oh my God, nothing is what we think it is. It's like a dream. It's not what we think it is. And then you enter the mystery and your consciousness changes.
It points out the insanity of thinking that we do know what it is. Hey, listen, we only have, gosh, this hour has flew by. We've only got a couple of 3 minutes left. What, is there something we haven't talked about you want to kick in? You want to say something to the audience? Tom's been putting this out on Twitter and Facebook and all that, and putting your website out, and the fact that you do workshops and all that. What can we talk about here that we missed? Anything that you would like to say?
Well, you know, I think we've covered a lot of very interesting stuff. I would invite people to come to my website. There's a lot of video there. They can connect with me there. You know, I'm a real person at the end of an email, and I love to meet people. I invite people to have a look at the idea of the mystery experience, to really consider the possibility that they can directly awaken, and that they, you know, this is not some hype. You know, it's just a genuine offer that if they want to experience it, they can. And I know a lot of people have to travel a long way for it, but, you know, my God, it's worth it. You know, it's so worth it to just taste that knowledge of who we really are. And, you know, that's why it's been a delight to talk to you and share that enthusiasm that I have with you, George, and to see what you're doing with your own enthusiasm for life. Because if we just all do that, then life can be sweet. You know, it just takes us to be, well, I call us sometimes ambassadors for oneness. To actually be an ambassador for oneness in the world. And if that sounds a bit grand, you can be a secret agent for love. Just slip in there without anyone noticing, apart from other secret agents. But you're still doing it. You're still bringing the oneness and the love into the world. And, you know, by golly, it needs it.
You know, I really kind of want to back up that idea that you just said, that there was a real person at the end of that email and a real author, and your real humility and your real spirituality shows everywhere, Tim. And just the fact that you are available, and all of this stuff hasn't gone off in some kind of an ego trip, is pretty powerful. I hope a lot of people show up at your workshop. I'm going to watch it, and I'm going to consider being there myself. I'd love to spend a little time with you. I appreciate your staying up as late as you've stayed. I hope you go from being deep awake to deep asleep and have some great dreams.
Fantastic. Yes, me too. It's been so nice to talk to you.
And we'll do this again. And also at some point I'd like to have Peter on the show if he would be interested.
Yeah, I'm sure he would.
Maybe we can get the two of you on at the same time and get technology working a little better here.
Right. Well, we can do it. We can do it together in the same place here.
That'd be great.
And I'm sure he would, and we'd love to do that. And I'd love to come back. I've got a new book out in May. I think it's my best book yet. I'm really confident of that, called The Mystery Experience.
Why don't you contact me when that comes out? We'll definitely do a show.
Fantastic. That would be a real pleasure.
Fantastic. Great. You have a good morning, I guess. Thanks again, Peter. Peter? I mean, Tim. I get talking about Peter Gandy, and my mind went askew.
You'd be surprised, George, how many people call me Peter and Peter Tim. I think there's some strange connection between us, and we've kind of morphed into each other.
Well, from the thing I saw, I watched one interview, and when I see how long you guys been together, there's a deep love there that's pretty enviable. That's really, really very, very nice. So you make it a good night now.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Good night to you, and good night to all your listeners.
Good night, Tim.
Right.
Well, gee, I'll tell you what. When I tell you that Tim Freke and Peter Gandy have been a couple of my teachers, their books have been invaluable to getting really disconnected from this whole concept of that Christianity would like to drop on your head. If you're wanting to find your way into a new spirituality, I suggest you try not only this book, How Long Is Now, which is a great read. I would really recommend you go back and catch some of his other books. There was actually a point in time where I had read several of them, and there was one book I wanted to find, and there wasn't a copy anywhere. It's been so long ago now, I don't even remember the name of it. But they're great. Their books are great, and give it a try. We got a really good guest for next week, Michael Murdad. We're going to talk about Tantra and the spirituality of Tantra. And so in the meantime, between now and next week, don't forget to accentuate the positive and have a fantastic week.